Okay, welcome to session number 2. Allies from the top, what can leaders do? Obviously, my name is Pat Tegens. I will be your moderator for this very special panel today. I am the co-founder of the Society of Heart's Delight, or Yuren She in Mandarin. We are a bilingual community of mostly Chinese professionals across various sectors here in the Bay Area. I lived in China for close to 7 years. And my wife is Chinese, so this is actually deeply personal to me. But it shouldn't have to be personal in order to be a strong ally. And that's something that I believe that our 2 guests here today not only understand, but have put into practice and have really shown with their actions that they're committed to being allies and to helping other leaders be allies. So today the focus is not just allyship, but digging a little bit deeper into sort of holding leaders accountable and what tools are available for leaders to use to implement and not just hold signs on the street. So I'm very, very excited about the session today. We only have about a half hour here, so we're going to have a rapid fire panel. And I'm so honored to have with us today Suzanne St. John Crane. She is the CEO of the American Leadership Forum of Silicon Valley, and she's the board chair of the American Leadership Forum National. And also with us today is Tom Giles. He's the executive editor of the award-winning global technology team at Bloomberg News, where he oversees the coverage of business and technology across Bloomberg's many platforms. So my goodness, it truly is an honor to have both of you here today. Thank you for agreeing to join us so last minute.
Happy to be here, Pat.
Yeah, it's my honor to be here.
Yeah, just so the audience knows, we started our first meeting about this rally was just 6 days ago. And we have an amazing team, mostly Asian women in tech. I think I'm the only non-Asian person on the team, which is a great honor. And so big shout out to the organizing team who worked really hard, and the platform Run the World, who has a great team backing us up here. So wonderful to have all of you with us. Please remember to donate, please remember to support, and let's stay in touch. Okay, let's jump right in. With Tom being a leader, you're a leader in the media yourself, and you also cover leaders in tech. I thought that your perspective would be especially interesting, given that you kind of see the trends that are happening out there in media with tech, and also caught our attention because you wrote a wonderful article just over a month ago, sort of holding Silicon Valley leaders accountable and essentially saying, where are the leaders from Silicon Valley at? And it feels like a lot has happened since February, since you wrote that article. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about why you wrote the article, why you thought it was important, especially covering tech. Some people might say, why talk about this topic when you should be focusing on technology news? And second of all, I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts and reflections on what's happened since that article, and what kind of trends are you seeing out there in the news?
Sure. Well, thank you, Pat. And it's my pleasure and my honor. We cover the technology industry, and what I started to see around February, this was in the time leading up to and just following the Lunar New Year, we all started to see it, the images, the very violent graphic images that were very arresting. And I started to look around, keep an ear to the ground, started to reach out to some of my friends in the Asian American community and asking the question of, is it just me, or is there kind of not a lot of conversation happening about this right now? And the overwhelming response that came back was, it's not just you. There's a dearth of conversation. There's a dearth of speaking out. There's an unwillingness to take a stance on this. And you saw it in different places. I mean, I won't go through the list. I mean, you definitely started to see people increasingly become aware and willing to issue statements, et cetera. But the more conversations I had with people in the community, and I do want to shout out to Eric Toda from Facebook, who wrote a really moving, if you haven't seen it, a very moving personal reflection on his grandfather's experience here in the U.S. And really calling to account people within the technology industry. And so I also had that same, you kind of go through when you start to hear about this, you kind of go through in your mind, well, okay, first of all, is it my place to write about this? Is it my place to shine a light on this? And then secondly, you brought this up, is why single out the technology industry? And the more I dug, the more it became clear a few things emerged. One is, look, the technology is based here in Silicon, in the Bay Area. And this is where there's a heavy concentration of Asians, as well as this is where the violence is taking place. It's happening right under our noses, literally across the street from us. It's in our backyard. Two, think about who the technology industry employs. Look at the vast numbers of people from South Asia, from East Asia, from Southeast Asia who are employed with the technology industry. And then third, and probably most importantly, is think about these companies, think about their influence, whether it's venture capital firms who are choosing tomorrow's technology, whether it's the biggest technology platforms that we're all using on a daily basis. They have this outsized influence, this outsized power, this outsized market capitalization. And so the resounding response that came back was absolutely there is a responsibility from this community to do something, to say something.
Well, thank you so much for being an ally. I mean, you really, besides that article, I've seen some of your tweets that you've posted, and you have quite a following. And I definitely think that these are the things that can make an impact. I'd love to hear, has there been any response from other people in the media reaching out to you, or other things that have happened as a result of your actions?
Well, I do want to share one episode, and it gets back to this question of our tendency, and I'll speak from people on the outside of the Asian American community. There's this tendency and a temptation to minimize the problems that are faced by the Asian community. There's a temptation. And the reason being, well, they're doing fine. It gets back to the model minority myth, right? And it's like, you know what? Again, this isn't necessarily my perspective, but it's one that you definitely see out there in the ether. It's, you think about the wealth, you think about representation, and when you look at the numbers of different groups that are represented within the technology industry, it's easy to kind of blur distinctions and lose sight of reality. When you start to really look into it, when I was in the previous session at the start before I came over to this one. And there was this realization about, senior leadership within the technology industry. There isn't that much representation. So the episode that I want to share is that, after I wrote the article, we had a panel at our Equality Summit that Bloomberg had a couple of weeks ago. And I put some tweets out there, and somebody challenged me on Twitter and was really trying to kind of poke holes in the numbers and say, well, I've done the math and I just don't see where this is an issue. I don't see where this is more than just a couple of kids shouting Wuhan virus at people. And I really, I had to, withhold I had to be restrained in my response. But I said, I really encourage you to, one, really look at the data. Go to Stop AAPI Hate, which has been masterfully tabulating and keeping data and keeping track of what's been going on. And, Cynthia Choi over there, who I spoke to from my article, really pointed out these numbers. One, there's just been an astronomical increase in incidents of violence, harassment. The list goes on and on and on. Two, it's just there's been an astronomical increase from previous periods. And three, these are unreported. There are so many people who are not.
Jump in here.
Please do.
because actually, my goodness, I wish we had 3 hours to talk about this. It's such an important topic. On the contrary, a lot of these numbers are underreported, and there've been, in terms of, visibility in the media. And I know we have so much to talk to Suzanne about, but can you speak a little bit about why do you think that the media hasn't been picking up these stories as much, and what do you think it's going to take for amazing editors like you to start to bring the necessary attention to this matter? Big question.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Suzanne's perspective, but I will just say that, again, too many people outside of the Asian American community have really bought into some of the mythologies that I hope that today's session and following ones will really do a lot to explode and demythologize. Again, these perceptions of, when you think about oppressed groups, we immediately go to immigrants, we go to like Latino immigrants, we go to Black Lives Matter. Obviously, all of those things are tremendously important, and there is a tendency to minimize because of things related to the minority myth, minimize instances of harassment and oppression, and it's really insidious, so I think that's one thing, and I think what it takes to start to really call people's attention to it is, sadly, it's pressure, and sadly it's real dramatic instances. Shocking violence. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen the footage, and then Atlanta happened. So,
yeah, I mean, when you for example, Xiao Zhenxie is 75, and she's the one in San Francisco who was just punched in the face. It really is unfortunate that it takes something so dramatic like that to happen to wake people up. And I know oftentimes you have these emergency, it's great, people are donating. I love seeing all the donations coming in. But, we really need to look at this in a more sustained way and sort of the longer term picture about how we can address these issues that are, deeply sort of rooted in our system. And I think for that question, our Suzanne really is just a dream panelist. I mean, you inspire so many people, Suzanne, and you've been called a leader of leaders. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the American Leadership Forum, it has a really interesting history, sort of being born out of this crisis of leadership and how to address that in a way that can really support leaders in being better leaders. So I can't think of a better guest, and I hope it's a real honor to have you here, Suzanne. I hope that I've represented your organization correctly. Feel free to chime in on anything else about American Leadership Forum that's important.
I would like to invite everyone just to take a deep breath right now. Seriously. I think we all need a moment of grace right now. And I want to share with you, even though I can't see you, I see you. I see you. Today we witnessed a closing of, the trial of Derek Chauvin, at least a week's worth of testimony. We saw a man ram his car into a barrier at our United States Capitol and kill a police officer. We are in the midst of a dis-ease that we have never healed from as a country. And I was reading an article this morning from Patrick Soon-Shiong, who's a billionaire owner of the LA Times. And he said, I've been completely disenchanted. I've been completely disenchanted. And I have to say that I feel that way too when I was born here. And so at ALF, what we're called to do is to bring together people to recognize each other's humanity. To recognize each other's humanity as leaders and as human citizens. And as a white woman, I can't start with fixing things. I have to feel it first. And if I don't face it, I'm not going to feel it. If I don't face it completely. And so I just want to say that I, as a leader, as an American, feel that we have so much work to do around facing our disease. It's not going to be healed with a hashtag. It's not going to be healed with a variety of statements. It is only going to be addressed by rooting out the infection, right, which is racism. And so that's what I want to open with today. My heart is heavy for what's been happening in our country. And we're not going to fix this with a simple solution. We have to go deep. Somebody in the chat mentioned ethnic studies. I want you to know that at school districts in California, there are folks showing up saying outright, do not teach ethnic studies. This is happening in California, in Silicon Valley right now. Okay? And so until we face our own racism as a country that this country was founded on and talk about it openly as leaders, we will not heal, and this will not change.
So on that note, what can and what should leaders do in concrete terms?
We need to look in the mirror first. All of us. If you look at Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, I just love the way that he frames that we all have this disease. We may not even realize it, right? But we have to do our own homework and look in the mirror, right? We have to do more listening than talking. We have to do a lot more listening than talking. At ALF, part of what we've done with our 740-person, network of cross-sector leaders is we've supported racial caucuses, Black at ALF, AAPI caucus, and the La Comunidad Latino caucus. And, in the last couple of weeks, they have joined together in community to support the AAPI community for what's happening right now, right? And so I think as we and I know some of the folks that are listening to this today are thinking about this. This isn't happening in a silo. We are suffering as a people right now and as a country. And as my sister Valerie Kaur says, right, who wrote the book See No Stranger, if you haven't read that one, please put it on the list. How do we as leaders start modeling seeing a piece of ourselves in strangers that we don't yet know? How do we look at somebody and see a part of ourselves we do not know? How do we lead with love? Even in corporate America, imagine that. Can we start with curiosity? Can we suspend judgment and lead with love as leaders? So I think there's so much we can do in terms of leaders of companies, right? In terms of creating culture that allows folks to bring themselves to work, their whole selves. In terms of creating dialogue circles, true ALF-style dialogue circles, where, again, everyone has a seat at the table and has an opportunity to speak and an opportunity to be heard. But it starts with us. It starts with us.
That's amazing. And, in our conversation just recently, you mentioned some pretty, I don't know if I can I call it news? It sounds like you haven't spoken about this publicly yet, right. But it's forthcoming. You talked about a complicity audit that was born out of a conversation with the Winners Take All author, Anand. Can you pronounce the...
Ghirdadas. I had to press on that one. Anand Ghirdadas, who wrote the book Winners Take All. And actually, Tom was on the ALF Silicon Valley board as well and was instrumental in kind of helping to shape that. But yeah, I mean, part of what we had this conversation with Anand, who said, if you haven't read his book, it's an expose on sort of the elite charade of changing the world in Silicon Valley. And it hurts a little bit to hear if you're a Silicon Valley executive, but it's an important thing to read and to understand that we can't, and this is what the complicity audit is really about, that we need to look in the mirror as companies too. Are we on one side using hashtags and saying and walking a good talk, and on the other side, for instance, lobbying to keep tax dollars out of our local communities that perpetuates inequity, right? So I think The complicity audit is a tool that ALF is going to be releasing that is a series of questions that are for people ready to be courageous and make real change, right? To look at these questions and say, does my company engage in these sorts of lobbying practices? How do I show up as a leader? Am I a white leader? Do I call that out and own my privilege and talk about it publicly? So these are a series of kind of hard-hitting questions that are meant to inspire us, right, to think about the consequences of our business decisions and how we show up as leaders. So you'll be seeing that. Hopefully your viewers are going to be seeing that soon.
Great, and I know the time goes so fast. We just have about 5 minutes left. I'm wondering, can progress be measured? Should there be tools to try to measure it? What would that look like? Is that necessary? How do you assess impact?
How do you measure love?
Right.
Right? I mean, if we can stop seeing things happen at the Capitol or the tragedies that we're seeing on the street, that's progress. If we see more people of color in positions, as Tom was sharing, of leadership, right, with actual seats at the table and shared power, that's progress. You know, somebody mentioned allyship training, which is another thing I would just highly recommend. I know our ALF AAPI caucus is going to be doing that with our own 740-person network. And CARE Bay Area with Zara Ballou, she does offer that as well. So that is another thing we as leaders can do in terms of working with teams and shifting culture and empowering our teams.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'd like to invite each of you to sort of close with some thoughts for Tom, for your respective field, and you're both coming from different perspectives here. What advice would you have for your peers or for other leaders on what you'd like to see them do?
Well, something that many of my friends have told me many times, and it's a word that recurs often, and that's invisibility. And so invisibility for the Asian community. And so something that what I've done is just have the conversations, get out there, listen, hear the stories, and then use my platform to amplify those. And so we did the article, we had the Equality Summit. We're able to, use those platforms, share those platforms, give voice to other people who may not have an opportunity to do that, and then bring the conversation into the workplace, into your company. Stop AAPI hate. We'll have somebody come and lead a dialogue. We had it at Bloomberg. I mean, those are just a small number of things. Make a statement. I don't mean to minimize that. It's got to start somewhere. People need to be seen. People need to know that you care, that you give a damn. So find a way to do that. A statement shouldn't end at a statement, but it's got to start somewhere. Give money, give your resources. There's a whole bunch of organizations, many of them represented here, that think about mental health. Think about Asian journalists, the Asian American Journalists Association, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. There's a lot of organizations that would benefit from this. But again, it's listen and be willing to engage in a dialogue and have some very hard conversations.
Thank you so much. Any quick closing thoughts as we wrap up the session, Suzanne?
It's not check the box diversity training. It's a lifelong journey. And be curious.
I love it. Thank you both so much. I wish that we were meeting under different circumstances. I wish this wasn't the thing that brought us together, but I really can tell you how much it means to me personally. I know to the feedback we're getting from the community, it really is wonderful to have your support. And for anyone who's out there who is interested in continuing this, we actually intend this to be the first of many more events. So please feel free to reach out to the leaders of this event, including myself personally, Pat Tegens at the Society of Heart's Delight. I do think it's really important that allies speak up. It means a lot to have allies there and having your back. And we can all be better allies. I know even for myself every day, I'm learning how to be a better ally. And I love that you ended with curiosity, Suzanne, because I do think it takes that, right? It takes being curious about other people, their lives, their perspectives, what they're going through. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget to donate. And for our next session, we have quite a lineup. So these are, we're going to be focusing on leaders in tech. I believe it is just a jam-packed lineup of speakers. And Shuo Chen is fantastic. She'll be moderating that event. And I believe you'll all be very inspired. So thank you so much for joining, and see you next time. Take care.